sometimes the numbers are very good in retrospect to look at and see your progress and see where you're at. But live, I don't think that necessarily you need to be staring at them. I think you just need to go out and do that whole kind of race on feel and see how it unfolds. Now, interesting, Dave, they've just gone over that leg snapper, and we said that what happens over there will give us a bit of an idea of things to come because it is a really nasty one. Straight away, we've got a break of 4 here. Anna Rogers and Alicia Stutz, they're the Revo riders. Anna Rogers plays a bit of a team leadership role there, strategically very good. And Alicia Stutz, I mean, we've had the privilege of watching her develop through season one. Said that each week getting better and better. They are joined by 2 of the Vixens. We've got Gill and Gillick, and we know that what Gillick can do, she's certainly stepped up and had some big results. So this is a dangerous little group. Now, my summation of this is that they're not going to push too hard to stay away, the 4 of them. But what they have done is kind of shown the race who's got good legs and who's feeling what. So they'll probably push for this intermediate sprint that's just coming up now. But it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't push too hard after that.
It's funny. This would be a great opportunity here. So quickly, they have these sprints with the points coming up. The points are scored 10 deep. So with a field this large, there's a lot of points on the table. So it is going to just regain contact with Group 2, joining Group 1 as they launch into the sprint here. It comes up pretty quickly. This is shaping up very similar to what we saw in the previous women's A race. And I'll talk about that in a moment as we're going to score the points, and it's going to be Haley Gill. She's having a great ride today. The Velocity Vixen rider here will take the 10 points across the line. It looks like Alicia Stutz is going to get up there for second. Rogers, Whitaker, Gillick. It was Broomham there doing a nice job of rejoining Kate right before that sprint. So, boy, the quality of riders that you see up on the front, again, it is 37.2K of racing with a significant climb. We're going to go back and look at the chase. These are the riders trying to fight back into the group. So, boy, this one has gone back and forth, Kate. As we've seen this couple riders join, then the sprint starts and they go out the back. Now they're fighting their way back in. Fantastic bike racing. I love it.
I don't see the need for that front group to push too hard and stay away. They've kind of made their point and shown their legs and their form a little bit. It is a long day, and the fatigue really adds up. Sometimes we look at the data, Dave, we look at the 20-minute power and we say, wow, look at what they can do. But that's often not 20-minute power at the end of a long, hard race. And so we need to consider that they don't want to carry unnecessary fatigue up to that climb at the finish. But generally, for anybody playing along who loves jumping on Swift Power to watch the numbers, the 20-minute power is what we're looking at today. And the watts per kg, because it is an uphill finish, that is also a very important number. I mean, I think that there are no real surprises in the names that are up there today. But, you know, it'll be interesting how the tactics play out, whether the teams kind of start to gang up on each other, so to speak, or whether they will just use a little bit of brute power to break it up at the finish.
Well, as they say, the cream rises to the top, Kate, and I think that right now, once these 2 teams here, and that's going to be ATP and Velocity Vixen, once they lock down this group here, so what happens now when we talked about the fact that this wasn't a large group that takes the start? There's so few riders left to chase. So we've gone over the leg snapper once, that 400 meters, that's a steep pitch at 7%. That puts the riders who are kind of on the edge here, it puts them in real trouble early. So then you have the fact that that sprint comes. That's another where the pace gets pushed to a very, very high level. So it is so hard at this point now, if you're sitting 23 seconds back where Velocity Vixen rider Girth is, I don't think the team's going to wait much for you here, because they've got right now they've got trouble in their hands here, because they look and they can see that I believe we've got the entire ATP team here. I'm kind of taking a look now. We're talking about Fazoli, Kelly, Connolly, and Grinnell. Not quite, is it? But Janet Gillick, up in this front group. She's one of the outlier riders here. Or actually, we're going back to the chase. So these are ATP riders, Kate, that are trying to tag back onto that front group. Let's see if they can do this or not.
I think it's a pretty big ask, actually. Anna and I always talk about when we're commentating the APAC, and she's an interesting one. You just commentated on her racing, Dave, and of course she races and commentates, so she's got that slightly different perspective again. But the one thing that have really noticed is that magic 15-second mark, and once a break goes more than 15 seconds out, it becomes very hard to bring it back unless the front group literally just sits up and stops working together. So Grinnell and Connolly, they're back at around the 18-second mark at the moment, but it has each couple of 100 meters, it gains another second. I don't think they'll be able to come back. And as we
Yeah,
say that, it ticks
they're
over to 19 seconds. I think this is our selection now.
Yeah, the train has left the station at this point. If you want to win the race today, you got to be in this group. And again, the reality of two riders now trying to make up 20 seconds on this group, which is the largest group out on course right now as well, the front group that we're looking at. So here we go. Haley Gill, who's clearly going to be good on the final climb after watching her the first time up the leg snapper. They're going to get another crack at that in another few kilometers here. Such an interesting course when you look at the Innsbruck ring. They do 3 circuits at 8.8 kilometers out here. It's almost like a world that's entirely a false flat. To tell you the truth, it outside of the climb going up leg snapper and then coming back down off of it, it's a lot of flat in Innsbruck, as here we are in the Alps. I think you're right though on the truce, Kate. I don't expect this group to attack itself too much here for the next lap.
Well, I'm becoming a bit of a data nerd the more that I do this. It's a bit of fun. And Haley Gill, I'm checking out her numbers. She's got a pretty low heart rate. Look at that, 145, 146. That's pretty comfortable. Let's take a look at Anna Rogers if we can get her up, because I think Anna Rogers is doing it. Her heart rate's a little bit higher again, which is interesting. Okay, only 5 or 6 beats above, but there you go, a bit of a slight difference. I think it just goes to show that Haley Gill, she really looks the most comfortable so far. Now, she's in pretty esteemed company, though, so she will want to play her cards pretty well. But you can really see the Velo Vixens hanging out on one side, the Revo hanging out on the other side. It's getting very kind of territorial already in this.
It's like the West Side Story, the musical of the two gangs, the Jets and the Sharks, right?
Or like Romeo and Juliet.
Exactly. So the warring families is in that case. So here we go now. This is going to be interesting. The points are so important. So these sprints make such a big difference. The ultimate outcome here, which is based on each team, you take the bonuses, the fastest timed segments as well. We haven't even touched on that yet. The FTS is the fastest time segments out here. We've got that QOM to look at once we get into the after party element of the KOM here. Right now in Innsbruck, though, we have a couple more sprints to look at that are scored 10 down to 1. That's a lot. I mean, Ev's world champion, you were all about points. You were a points monster.
Yeah, well, the first thing, of course, we'll notice, they've just started, but look at how big this is, right? We've seen them come to the fore a lot in the past 2 weeks. We're in week 3 now, and in season 1, they were already a fairly shining light. So I don't know. What we saw in the men's um, in APAC was that it was actually quite a different bunch of riders going for those intermediate sprints than the ones that ended up climbing quite well. So it looked like to us that the team strategies were really divided into two, kind of what we were just talking about before. A quick look at the team standings here. Pen Velo A and Dirty Rascals Right, they are both on 37 points. But on the Rivet Haze, not far off, or OMG, they killed Kenny, or Alto Velo Racing. They're the 5 teams that have been gobbling up all of the points so far. So it's still very much an open season.
Well, I love it. So you really do get a feel for what the women are up against racing in that smaller group, because they don't have the luxury. Kate, you make a fantastic point, because I would be designating riders. Hopefully you have enough range on your team and ability level to say to a couple of guys, why don't you try to pick off some intermediate points for us here during the 3 sprints that we have, and we'll keep our best climber in reserve, and then allow him or her to have at it in that 7.4K journey at about about 5.5% on that climb. So, Kate, as you noted, play to your strengths, right? If you were out here racing, you would have been going for these intermediate sprints, because you could have gotten over the leg snapper. That would have been within your range, absolutely. Now, for a track racer out racing on the road, to ask them to do a climb like that, 7K and over 5%, really basically 6, that's a huge ask for someone who doesn't consider them to be at least a very competent climber as an all-arounder.
Yeah, I mean, the leg snapper is about 30 seconds worth. So the sprinters should be able to get over that, especially the power sprinters. They will
The
get
good
in, I mean,
ones,
7.4
right?
kilometers. The good
Okay.
ones, yeah. I mean,
Yeah, right.
7.4K is a bit different. But I'd also say that the ones who are looking forward to that final climb, for the most part, will struggle to put out enough power to get over the leg snapper with those really powerful, good sprinters. So a climb is not a climb. You can't just assume when the road turns up that only one kind of rider will do it. So the women on the left here, they're hitting the leg snapper for the second time. We saw it split up quite decisively over that first one, and in
Uh-oh.
fact, that was what caused that group of 8 ultimately to form. That group of 8 have consolidated their lead now. There's now 28 seconds back to that chasing group, so I think that is sorted out. But Anna Rogers pushing the pace a bit. Interestingly, though, she's not hitting the orange in her numbers, so she's not
Well,
actually sprinting up there. She's just kind of seated acceleration and really stringing it out. This is where we can see Broomham and Cabot are both struggling a little bit at the back. I have no doubt they'll come back over on the top, but we already know that their legs are hurting a bit.
I don't know how many times you can come back from that. It's the same names, the usual suspects, if you will. I think just ability is what we're looking at right now, Kate. Natural selection, if you will, because it's that group of riders there with the women now. So they've gone over the leg snapper for the second time. That might split the group for good. So you have to remember that it was a lap ago that the same basic scenario played out, and those women were able to fight back as they came together for that next bonus sprint. I don't know, Kate. I don't know if they're going to be able to do it. The men now just going up and over the top of the leg snapper for the first time here on their first of 3 laps down on the Innsbruck ring. Look at this long, thin line of pain right now. Kriegman of the AVRT team up on the front here.
Well, I
Power-ups
saw a
that are
lot of
available.
orange going into their day. They like a lot of the guys went into that orange zone, and that means that they're really pushing. I mean, you don't get into the orange by simply dropping a gear and sitting in your seat and kind of accelerating, but it is a pretty quick run into the sprint here, so it's not too far to go. I feel like maybe that was a slip of the finger to drop a power up there because
Uh-huh.
there's just it's not really going to help you when you ride up the front there anyway, and they're going, nearly 70k an hour. That
A
won't help you too much,
misfire.
but they
A
Yeah,
misfire
maybe.
gate,
I mean,
right?
it's
Yeah.
easy to do, right?
I think I saw one earlier today, actually. We were talking about exactly this same thing about 6 hours ago, where the question was, why would you use that power up right there? And I said, I don't think there was a reason other than your finger slipped, possibly. Or maybe your friend who is helping you had a moment of inattention. You never know. So a lot of riders will have a squire at their side. Here we go, though. They're attacking now for that first sprint points, 10 points for the first. And with the depth of this field, this is the Sosnowski, the honey badger, in full effect. Let's see if it's enough. They're going to come for him. Ah, I got it. No problem. 10 points in the bank.
Well, I tend to think not only will he get first over the line there, but probably fastest segment too. I mean, the little green jersey has just popped up next to his name because that was really fast, and it says to me the way that he jumped
That was
exactly
a plan.
on the
That
start
was
of
a
that
plan, wasn't it?
segment that was the plan. Yeah, because it
Yeah.
is a good way to get extra points. That even if people are able to accelerate past you because they've had a bit of a slipstream, it's often a good way to just get some extra points. We can see top right of screen. I love that graphic, the dots. It kind of gives you a bit of an idea of how strung out they are. And they are. It is a long line here. There will be a lot of riders that are just hanging on. It is, as you mentioned, pretty much false flat the whole way around back to that leg snapper. So I think that the speed is not going to drop. And those riders that are struggling at the back, this is where they really need to kind of buckle down because once that gap opens up, it's like an elastic band. And once it snaps, well, it's all over Red Rover. I'm always interested, Dave, when we see public messages dropped on the down. So it looks like Jay Anderson from Evo, is he letting everyone know that he got dropped on the downhill? I mean, that's a bit of a curious one. But, you know, there will be a few that has dropped. Now, let's take a look at the replay of the women's sprint that we just had here. They also were going through for the second time. And a big acceleration again from Hayley Gill. She's definitely the one that's looking pretty comfortable today. Alicia starts not too far behind Anna Rogers, just adrift ahead of Jana Gillick. What you noticed, Dave, Whitaker and Bromham, and even Cabot, they are now dropping to 7 to 8 seconds behind. That's kind of danger territory there. So this is now a very select group of 4.
Yeah, we're back to this group again. So again, in the director role here, when you look at Brunham and Whitaker, you start thinking, okay, so let's start consolidating. Although we have a long way to go, the entire climb now. So, but you look at that next group, they're kind of in no woman's land now, but the points that are available, so through the bonus sprint, there'll be another one of those here. So, and those are pretty significant points, you know, in that 5 and 6 points each time, or 4 points actually for 6th. But we're looking again at a chase coming together here. They completed 2 of the Innsbruck Ring of 3 laps that they have before we move into. So these laps are the appetizers, and then we move into the main course, which is the QOM climb. It is a brute, and everything changes there. But I think that front group will remain that front group at least until we hit the bottom of the climb, and then we'll start seeing some fireworks. But I expect that those 4 now, looking into reading the tea leaves, we get a chance to actually look at data. That's always nice. As Hayley Gill has been the best of the sprinters out here, but Alicia Statt's done a really good job for the sitting with 18 points now. Anna Rogers at 16. Just these are the distribution that we've been looking at. Janet Gillick, 13. She's tied with Jessie Whitaker there. All right, it gives you a look at how the points have been handed out so far. We have a lot more, though, to talk about. We did have a rider in the previous race, Kate, Tara Cole, who ended up picking up the QOM, and so the fastest segment and the race win all in one swoop there. A lot of points available at the finish. Always remember that.
Well, and they've changed it up this season, so the points go a lot deeper, which I think is good. Especially, I mean, look at the size of the field in the men here. Although, oh God, that's a lot smaller than it was last time we saw it, wasn't it? Certainly been
Sure is.
whittled down in that first lap. And let's just take a look at the bonus points so far. Sosnowski, he rode we thought that he might get fast through segment and first across the line. The honey badger there. We call one of our rugby players in Australia the honey badger. Nick Cummings, I mean, that's a whole nother story. He ended up being the bachelor too, so maybe that's
Oh, really?
Sosinowski's being the Canadian bachelor. Tim Rush was in second across the line, Ziegler in third, Heinemann in fourth. What's interesting about this is all of the different teams that are represented there. So we're not seeing at this stage any particular domination of one team over another, but it is starting to really whittle down that bunch size. It started very large, and we do expect, I think, the next couple of laps. They've only been over there once now over the leg snapper. I reckon, Dave, the next couple of laps, this will cut in half again the size of this field.
I would sign off on that for sure. The early circuits here, there's got to be some riders here that just playing it cool right now because they know the fireworks on that final climb, a lot will be decided. So this is quite a conundrum that you face with this course. How do you play your cards out here? And most of these teams at this point have a director. There's certainly discussions about strategy and tactics, and that's what makes this racing so much fun. But you can see as these guys now are getting into it, they have quite a bit of racing ahead of them. The women are about to wrap up things on the Innsbruck ring. But in this group now, I think that they're, as you said, there's got to be some guys at the back of this group, right? Because you're not really, well, kind of two different groups of passengers sit at the back of this the front group that we're looking at now. The riders that are trying to just keep that TSS as low, be efficient there, and they're not worried about closing down gaps, and some of the guys that are kind of holding on right now because they keep the pace pretty high out here, Kate.
Yeah, it's always a mixed bag at the back, isn't it? Like you've got,
Yeah, it is.
That's possibly the one thing I miss is being able to see their faces, because it's always interesting to see, especially when they pan to the back of the bunch. You've got some people kind of freewheeling, taking a drink and having a good old time, and others who are just hanging on by the skin of their teeth. We can just assume that that's going on, especially when they're going this speed.
And when you're having trouble breathing, right, it's very, very hard to hide that when you're really suffering. So you do get a feeling for the guys that are breathing through their nose and those that are at the limit. It's hard to hide.
Well, we do sometimes get their Twitch feeds through, and I love that. I love seeing, the physicality behind it. We did the Tour of Oz a couple of weekends ago, and Nathan, our producer, he was racing,
I know.
And we switched to him a couple of times. And even though his data said that he was working pretty hard, he was still smiling and giving us a thumbs up, and even able to have a bit of a chat to us. So that was pretty impressive, actually. It kind of put the kibosh on us saying that maybe he wasn't doing so well.
It's awesome to watch that with Nathan and Anna Russell also, another one of our colleagues that has that amazing ability to be able to actually direct the team while racing and communicate. It's a next level person, that's for sure. I appreciate it when you see someone who's that good at what they do. This is Baumhofer that we're looking at on the Audi A team. This team out of the Pacific Northwest. I believe that's where their riders, or at least most of them, are going to be located. You never really know in the world of Zwift, do you, Kate? But the riders really could be from anywhere. As if you, it's you're not going to see many Europeans racing in this time zone, as it's going to be 4 o'clock in the morning. But
no, we tend to see the Aussies and the North Americans in this time zone for sure. Now, this is quite an interesting bunch that's forming here. We've got still about 50 riders left, but there's a couple of names that we don't often speak about necessarily, who will be climbing like demons. Caleb Carl, who we're watching now, he's got a 20-minute average of 5.8 watts per kilo for 20 minutes. That kind of makes my legs hurt straight away. And I have a feeling
world class.
Doesn't it? Yeah. So even though he's not a name that we often necessarily even pick out of the pack. I think this is definitely the kind of course that might show. And I love that they've mixed it up a bit to put in such a brutal course at this point in the season. In one comment you made earlier, Dave, that I kind of giggled to was some of them are in a bit of a conundrum with what to do with their tactics. And I think a lot of these teams will have a lot of riders who are more suited to the kind of sprinting world of Zwift. And on a course like this, you don't have a lot of options. It's kind of a survival strategy.
You can,
And
yeah.
then on the other hand, just see what happens, see what you can do.
It's not like you decide today that you're going to give it a go on the KOM after party and be successful. You know whether you're a climber or not, right, Kate? It won't surprise you that you're able to do this.
No,
right.
no. I mean, that's kind of one of the cool things about the Zwift world is you actually have a lot of new cyclists who are just discovering what they can do and the kind of rider they are. And so there will be a very small percentage of these riders who really surprise themselves out there. But on the left, we've got a bit of a live stream going on. And so on the right is what we
That's
are
Caleb.
feeding through. And on
I
the
believe
left,
that's
yeah,
Caleb
look
Carl.
how
Yeah.
he's so comfortable, Dave. He doesn't even look like, I mean, I feel like he could be
Is
kind
he
of
wearing
writing a
long
novel at the same
sleeves?
time.
Okay,
Yeah.
this is the first
Maybe he's
time I've
got his
ever
garage
seen
door open or
yeah.
something.
So I'm going to have to do some research here. Where does Caleb Carl live? Because obviously it's a cold climate there. If he is in that jersey right now, that actually looks like a wool jersey, to tell you the truth. So I get
It's
it.
like
He's
an
probably
old
got
Eddie Merckx style.
absolutely. This looks like the Tête en Course, the Eddie Merckx movie from 1972, with Eddie riding with Axel in the garage on the rollers, right? Old school throwback. Caleb Carl, awesome to have you out there. Nathan, thanks for finding that. So, a rider clearly of high caliber here that we're looking at. It's a good look at how what it's like to be in the group from his perspective. Here's our top sprinter, looking at a replay of the sprint that happened just a moment ago. We'll be back to live action in just a moment here, but Sosnowski has been clocking them now 2 for 2 on this. Well, excuse me, that's the first sprint that we were looking at here, as those points were scored. Now, get a look at the second now, with Wu coming across the line. And this one, then, a little bit different than we saw from sprint number 1. They've got another sprint to look forward to out here. They'll be back through that arch, Kate. But they're doing such a great job. Thank you, Nathan. It's so cool having a world-class producer, as Nathan's been doing broadcasts starting in the APAC almost 24 hours ago. And that's a day in the world of Zwift. And look forward to Nathan's going to be back on World of Zwift. Look forward to hearing his take on all the community racing. It's so cool. I hope you've been enjoying that show. But here we go, back with our front group. So they got another trip up the leg snapper. Oh, joy, say a few of the guys.
Well, I think I'll have to laugh at that because that's kind of sarcastically probably exactly what a lot of them are saying. But we can see the group's gotten a lot smaller. The big difference with the next leg snapper is that it's then not too far to the sprint and then the bottom of the climb. So they kind of can't afford to sprint as hard if they have any hopes of staying connected through that climb. So it is a bit of a danger point, definitely, and teams will need to make sure they keep toward the front because there's nothing worse than hitting a climb and having the riders in front of you drop wheels and having to go around them. I mean, that's kind of climbing
Right.
suicide, so you really need to watch out for that.
Isn't that the thing that you learn in real life racing, Kate, is sometimes, your positioning when you're back in that back third of the group, so oftentimes it's not that you're letting go, it's the rider 4 riders in front of you that bails on trying to hold on. And all of a sudden that gap is 8 feet before you've even noticed it. And now here we are again with the gap to close down when we're already clearly not on a great day, right? That's bike racing, kind of the reality of it's not all roses and unicorns out there. A lot of times you're getting road spray coming up on your face as you're trying to close down a gap for the 15th time because someone let the wheel go.
You
Right?
make it sound so romantic. We're just going to take a look at the sprint that the women just had, which is the final sprint before they're heading out up the climb. So we'll take a look at that when we can, because for the women, it is just about to get interesting. So we're watching Helena Broomham here now. I'm really interested in her position within this because she is a very good climber, and I'm glad to see she's come back. And interesting, the first couple of sprints, she actually struggled to hold on, but I think that was probably more a positioning thing, like we've been speaking
Exactly.
about. Trying to
Well,
get
you know,
past crossing the line, but more importantly, Alicia Stats will take the win there. Oh, Hayley Gill got rolled. That was a bit of a turn on the tables. But interesting for Broomham is that I was worried for her in that last sprint. I wanted to say she just has to hang on because on paper she's the best climber we have out there with Alicia Stats. They're the two real standouts in this bunch. And whatever's happened this couple of kilometres, it's now down to 4 and she's up there. So this is pretty good riding from her.
very well put. And that goes to show you when you look at the first lap out here on Innsbruck Ring, things were not going her way. She was in that second group. The gap had gone out to, let's say, 10 seconds, and it was touch and go there for a little while as they chased back in. They rejoined right before the sprint. So remember that, Kate? They came over the top of Legstapper. She got gapped. Was so clearly not positioned well. They all chased back before the sprint, then another gap. But she's the one rider who was in that situation who has survived, and all of a sudden, this reminds me of a tennis match. How you can be struggling in the first couple of sets, but then you start to get your act together. Then all of a sudden, the momentum swings, and by the time we get to the bottom of the climb, she's going to be in this group, and all of a sudden, she becomes the danger woman. Isn't it interesting how bike racing is this plot line? But you can directly affect, much like your own life story, right? If you stay on top of it, keep fighting, good things happen. If you give up, I don't think good things are going to happen, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So good for her.
Well, I saw a thing yesterday on one of those delightful social media platforms that the kids use called TikTok. I'm not really I'm too old to be on TikTok, if I'm honest, but it's still entertaining sometimes. Look at that. Haley ripped off my legs in the sprint from Alicia. That's pretty funny. She's obviously doing all right if she's able to type that.
Yeah.
And she probably typed that so that we could see it too, which is fabulous.
She's cool.
But I
Yeah.
saw on TikTok and it said that motivation isn't what comes first. The action is what comes first. And I thought that that's actually really good to remember when you're in the Zwift world or you're racing. And sometimes you can feel a bit intimidated by a climb to come, but you often find yourself, if you just get out there and get on it, that it builds and it builds and you feel all right. And I think that's a mindset that, the riders who may not necessarily be climbers need to take into this climb to come, because it can be pretty intimidating otherwise.
Probably one of the most important things to have in your arsenal as an elite athlete is exactly what you just said, Kate. It's a must have. The ability to throw it. Another thing is you got to be willing to take risks if you want to win. And I think that's what we're going to see ultimately out of this group, our front group here for the women. The final 7.5K is what they chart when you look at like Zwift Insider. They talk about that and the gradient there and how steep it is, 5.5%, but it's not an even it definitely varies when you look at the pitch on the way to the finish line. Never completely flattens out, but it isn't so steep and especially near the finish. There's a little bit of a reprieve, and that's obviously in this group now. You wonder what we're going to see. We watched an absolutely brutal attack. Just going nuclear level. I don't know if you have nuclear plants in Australia or not. That's a decent question, actually. I bet you do. But
yeah, we are not many though. We don't like them as Australians.
No, not a popular thing.
We do have a few. No.
So it's sort of a weird way to describe an effort, but it was next level. The attack that we saw inside the final K to win in the women's race from Tara earlier. Now Tara Fretter. Now I'm not sure what's going to happen here. And it's interesting. we talk in stats and data, and it is one of the really cool things. But I was telling Nathan earlier today, fitness and desire are a house with no windows. You can't see inside. You just don't know what kind of heart a rider has and what kind of motivation a rider has. And sometimes that's the difference on a climb. I mean, you have to have the ability to be there. Let's not kid ourselves. It's not like anybody can want it enough, but wanting it does matter, doesn't it, Kate?
Yeah, it definitely does. If you, there's definitely, don't you have, you'd have these days too, Dave. We all have them. We in Australia call them CBF days. Can't be F word.
Yep.
And that's how we would
Mental health
always use
days,
it
right?
to, yeah, to
Yeah.
describe those days where you're just like, not today. And it happens when you're on the bike as well. I think that's why sometimes if you can break it down and just have a plan, this climb is 7.4 odd kilometers, but there's kind of 3 pitches to it. And if you're not loving the climb, the best way to approach it is to just bite off each section at a time,
Yeah.
get through that first really pitchy bit, know that you have a couple of 100 meters where it is around the 1-2% mark and you can get a little bit of reprieve and then ready yourself for the next one. And that way you don't actually have to rely too much on this whole raft of motivation. And if you're feeling a little bit CBF, you might still be able to make it up. We're back to the men now. This bunch is getting smaller again. And look at the
Sure
orange
is.
numbers because they're going up the leg snapper here, and they're they're working pretty hard to do it.
Yeah, this is that moment where you say there are riders trying to break guys at the back of this group. Kate, it makes me laugh thinking back of some of my favorite moments with you. The PMA, the positive mental attitude, that can be really hard to keep when they're doing this to you and you're at the back of the group because it's an absolute throwdown right now. Gotta love Penn Velo as Platushin here making this one happen. We got ourselves an absolute Donnybrook going on now as they're on the fall from the wall, the backside now of the leg snapper. This is going to bring us now. This is the final act that well, the penultimate act, I should say. We got a sprint to look forward to for these guys right now. They're flying through Innsbruck, but they're ready to get off the Innsbruck ring and onto the KOM after party here. It's quite a race going on now, but Kate, you called it. That group has been dramatically reduced. There'll be another splitting of this group coming. Few riders fighting back. Good job here. I'm super impressed when you see this. They didn't give up, and they're going to rejoin. Nice work, gentlemen.
Well, we had about 65 after the first leg snapper, about down to 45 over the second. We're now down to under 35. So there's certainly, as the name would indicate, a few legs have been snapped. Good to see Brian Kellison up there. He's one that we often get to dial into Twitch and see how he's going. He always rocks a bit of a retro style for us. Cam O'Reilly, he was very good last week, so good to see him up there as well. This is where the jockeying and positioning starts a little. They've just crossed the line into that intermediate sprint, and they're dropping their power-ups and they're going for it. Wu again hitting out hard. But I don't actually think they're going quite as hard as they have in those first 2 intermediate sprints. Ziegler ends up taking it ahead of Muko. Looks like Swinton might have snuck in for third there. But look at this, straight away, the effort comes off, the foot comes off the accelerator, and the rest of the bunch catches back up. That's because they know they've only got about 3.5 kilometres now until the bottom of that climb. So this is the time to recover. And for those poor riders off the back there, Brian Kellison, come on, mate. This is the time where it counts. You got to push. So he's just dagged off the back a little bit there, and we can see the picture from him. He is working pretty hard. Based on those numbers, though, I think he might have given up the goat. He's down around the 3 watts per kilo mark. I think we might have just seen a mushroom cloud.
The man himself, Brian Kellison. We've always enjoyed watching his Twitch stream. Thanks for finding that. Penn Velo, the team. Well, what a throwdown at the front. This is Brian here that we're looking at. This is AVRT rider Wu, who's been one of the top sprinters out here. He's collected quite a few points for his team. Whittling down has been completed. Now the riders that have been waiting to get after it now, for them, As I would say, the appetizers have been served and enjoyed, but the real climbing for the mountain goats is to come. So both of these races moving into the finale now. This is the honey. I think everywhere you go around the world, I bet you if you went to the Mongolian Soccer League, there's a guy nicknamed the Honey Badger. It's probably the world's most popular. We have an NFL player named that here, right? So it certainly speaks to that classic YouTube video from, geez, that's got to be 10 years ago now. I'm sure you've seen the Honey Badger video with the narration of Honey Badger don't care. Basically, it is not afraid
It's
of anything.
it's very entertaining. I mean, I'm actually now, like, in my head, I'm painting a picture, of the physicalities of all of these honey badgers, whether we have, like, a generic honey badger look or not. I'll have to do a bit of Googling to figure that out. We're back onto the women now. They're on the slopes, the lower slops, lower slops. That's probably what they feel like, Dave, the lower slopes of this climb. Uh, I think Alicia Stats is probably the one to really watch here. And she's just been, every week she's been getting better. So I actually, to a degree, think that her Zwift power numbers probably aren't as reliable as some of the others, because I feel like she outdoes them on a quite regular basis. Helena Bromham, she's another one that I'm looking at her watts per kg for the 20 minutes in envy, because it's not the kind of numbers of sprinter like me. I was never described as a delicate climber or something like that. But I would say that Helena Bromham definitely seems to be one of the delicate climbers.
But I describe you as a hero, just so you know, Kate. I
Oh,
wanted
look, I'll
to.
take that, Dave, anytime.
Yeah, you are world champ and all that. So, hey, Alicia Stats, because of the beautiful thing that is the internet, I learned that she has been fully vaccinated for the COVID-19, which I think is incredibly cool. Um, Obviously, we're all around the world working hard to get to that goal, right? Where we can race together in real life and combine that with Zwift racing. So, Alicia, a mom, she's got a really an interesting, cool life going on in Seattle, and I love the fact that we've got her on this 10% grade in the mix with these monsters. As this climb has got real, 10%, Kate. You can't fake it on a 10. This is where your smart trainer, at least my smart trainer, starts making a weird noise.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the weird noise can't really be heard over your
It's,
lungs exploding and the
well, that
breathing,
my
the
smart
heavy
trainer says the same thing
breathing.
about me. It's like, hey, that's a pot calling the kettle black right there, because yeah, everybody's hurting here. Well, like I said, there's no way to fake it, but it looks like Rogers and Stats are really going to start a roll this one, Kate.
Yeah, well, it's hard to hit the bottom with only 4 riders. Now, interestingly, the first to go there is Bromham. Now, on paper, she is a super solid climber, but we say it every time. The numbers that we see is their best, and they are all multitaskers to the max. So we don't know what's going on in her life at the moment. She may not be at her peak fitness. And the other thing I've noticed about Bromham is that we haven't seen her quite as much in the weeks to date. So I think that she's on a pretty steep trajectory of learning how to race in Zwift. Rogers and Starts, on the other hand, are kind of turning into old hands now. They're really pretty textbook in their approach and dominating
It's kind of all
how to do
business,
the.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you see the comment on the right? Worst after party ever from Yana Gillick. That's because there she is. She's hit the bottom of the
Could
climb, and she's like, "This sucks.
That's
What am I doing?"
hysterical.
Keep going, Yana. You'll get there. Nothing about this is a party. From Anna Rogers. Hey, these ladies must be feeling all right, because they can still text. So,
Although
that
I have
kind of says
learned,
enough in itself.
like if you see Alicia Stats putting something up, there's a decent chance that she's turning to one of her family members an analog, saying, "Hey, write this," and then they type it in for her. I'm wondering Anyway, I love this category. Ladies, awesome racing again. Throwdown underway. But Janet Gillick, a good example of the quality of racers that we've got out here as she's working her way up the climb. She's got about 5K to go, a little bit less for this group. This is the front group now, the vanguard here. Talked about the Tron bike being a good choice. There's plenty of folks who think there's maybe a slightly better choice, but they've evened this one out now. There is no color of Tron bike that's faster than another, unless Nathan knows something I don't. The hot pro tip, the orange Tron bike is faster. But that's not true. I'm just kidding. They're all the same,
It's all
right?
about
Anna
style
would know.
points. I mean,
Anna Russell would
yeah,
know if any. Right.
we need to dial Anna in for a little bit of a fashion police segment in every league and see how they're going. But I think that this is pretty good that Hayley Gill has gone orange and orange. I mean, I think there's been a bit of thought that's gone into this coordination.
Hey, when you raced over here in North America, Kate, you remember Catherine Curie?
Of
Yeah.
course, yes, we've seen her
Sure
a
you
fair
do.
bit
She
racing,
won.
haven't we?
Yeah,
Did
yeah, she
she?
had a great.
Oh,
She
the
won
legend.
at Premier League. Well, you were fast asleep. We
Oh,
completed that race yesterday, and she's in the chat right now. She's been cheering on her Sisu teammates. Always nice to see. I love the way our community is so connected out here. So, Catherine, thanks for being with us today. Congratulations on a great win yesterday. That was really, really fun to watch in the Premier League. And some of these women have aspirations of racing in that Premier League. And that's one of the cool things about this. For our friends who haven't been up to speed with ZRL, this is our second season, third race. We have team time trials. And then this is the finale of race 3. The women that you've got on your screen now, Hayley Gill, is having a great day today. Well, they are trying to do the math here, 4K from the finish, but it's a 5.5% grade on average from here. But when I say on average, that really does matter because it ranges from about 3% to 10% along the way here, Kate.
it
Not
is.
steady.
It's not just a long slog, which is actually quite good, and that suits Hayley Gill quite well because she's a bit more sprint inclined than the other two in this break. So that will actually allow her to recover a little bit. If it was just constant 7 to 10% the whole time, it would burn her legs a little bit. But so long as the power profile can dip up and down a little bit, I think that'll suit her more. The fellas on the right, they are also on the slopes of the climb, not too far behind. And
So,
we were going to actually jump in and take a look at the B men at some point when we can as well. But we can see the difference here on the left. The women, it's about 7%. The men, it was just at about 10% before. So it definitely pitches up and down.
what's amazing to me is here we are 40 minutes into this race. They've only got 5K to go, talking about the men's A's right now in front of us. Well, they haven't even done half of the climbing that they're going to do in this race yet, Kate. It's over
Gosh,
630 meters when you get to the
that's
finish. So,
intimidating, isn't it?
yeah, that's what you call the sting is in the tail. That's for sure. So a big group now, and we're into it. This is not the bottom of the climb. We're moving into the sweet spot now. 5-6% grade. It just got real now for a massive group. Boy, we're gonna have a real throwdown here to find out who the top climber is. I haven't seen many groups this large for all of the racing that we've been doing. This is Mashed Potato, another rider we love. Evo is the team up
I
in the
just love
mix.
the name mashed potato, don't I? It's fantastic. Caleb Carl and Cameron O'Reilly are the two that I have highlighted on my
Good call.
spreadsheet here. I think
Well,
they're quite different.
Caleb Carl has real credentials. I mean, he's done this before. Let's put it that way.
I mean, not to mention that when we flick to his Twitch before, he actually looks like Eddie Merckx in his long sleeve woolen jersey on the trainer. We have to find out where he is because it was 42 degrees here in Sydney, Australia yesterday, and the idea of
He's not there.
no, getting on a trainer in a long sleeve jersey, I feel like that's how you'd prepare for a weigh-in for a boxing match or something like that. But yes,
we're on
he's
it.
been very comfortable the whole day. Now, interesting, Caleb Carl and Cameron O'Reilly, the two that I'm watching, they've got pretty different kind of physicalities. There's about 10 kilos weight difference between them and different power profiles. However, when you start to drill down to their longer threshold powers, their watts per kg aren't too dissimilar. So that will be quite interesting on the flat. I think Carl has a definite advantage, but now that it's pitching
Well,
up,
I
that's where
know
Cameron O'Reilly might come into his own.
this answer is going to make you laugh because Caleb Carl is exactly where I am. He's in Colorado.
Oh,
Rides for the Groove Subaru Excel sports team. Excel is a mail order bike. They do a great job down in Boulder. Groove Subaru is a really strong team here, and it's fitting because it's probably 20, so -5 degrees Celsius here, pretty cold. The other end of the spectrum for where you are at 41, which for our American viewers would be double it and add 30. So it's 100 degrees in Sydney, Australia, where my esteemed colleague resides. This is the front group, a little bit smaller now. It doesn't get bigger at this point. You can see a few riders that'll try to prove me wrong, and good on them for doing that. But if you're getting tailed out of the group right now, things are not going your way, as they say. You never know, though, especially with, the technical. Boy, we saw Christina Grossman have an untimely technical in the previous race, so it can happen to anyone at any point. Always remember that, just like a flat tire in real racing. But, Kate, I'm going to throw it back to you, because these guys are getting down to it. As a matter of fact, both of our races are into what I would call the grand finale.
yes, definitely the business end. We've lost about 10 riders so far on the lower slopes of the climb. Honestly, I thought we'd lose a bit more by now. I mean, it kind of indicates that they're not, no attacks have really gone yet. They're just starting to ramp that
Right.
pace up, but it's not particularly strung out. It's unusual to see a blob like this forming on a climb, but I think they do know how far to go, that it's still quite a long slog, and nobody wants to be the guy that goes early and blows up. We saw there's a team racing in the APAC League, a new team from Germany, Beast Mode Crew, and we thought that they would make a huge impact on the climb, and it wasn't to be. But what they did do, one of their riders at the mid section of the climb bridged across like this epic effort on one of the flatter sections, and we were like, this is a real game changer. But the minute it's hitching up again, his legs obviously weren't playing ball anymore, and it was kind of a reminder that once you get dagged off the back, it's really hard to come back, especially when there's a big group at the front. And so I think we're seeing this really whittle down to less and less. And I don't think that anything about that will change. Cameron O'Reilly, he's going into the orange. He is attacking. Now,
Big
Aiden
attack.
Oliphant, he is another one that I think we should watch, and he is on the front of that chase. But if he can keep the pressure on doing this, look, he's even dropping the power up. So he is serious about trying to make this move. It's just opened up to 3 seconds, 4 seconds. I reckon this is a good one, Dave.
That's
this is a dangerous move.
I'm fascinated by the psychology of the racer here, because throwing a lot of coal onto the fire, to use that expression here, because he's opening up a huge gap. So that feather certainly wasn't wasted. So if you're trying to, let me ask you this, Kate. I know it's kind of hard to put yourself in that mindset, but why would you use the feather there? He's super strong, so I'm not doubting the talent in any way. Why wouldn't you save that for the finish in case that you have a chance for you know what I'm saying? It seems like an interesting play, and I understand that, racers have reasons why they do things, and I'm not trying to outthink him at all, because I could see the logic being, I'm going to get a gap, I'm going to make it 12 seconds, and how about them apples? That is quite a gap to open up, make it 13. So he's pouring it on here. Clearly that feather was used intentionally, and I guess just try to really open up a monster gap. Was that psychological, Kate?
I think it's kind of half our job
10
to
seconds
try
without
and
the feather.
So I think it's a really simple case of he's got one massive attack in him, and he's gone, "I'm going to commit to this. I will put everything out there. If it does not work, I will then get blown out the
There you
back
go.
because I don't have
That makes
anything left."
sense.
And
Right. He's
so
front
then
end this
throw
thing. So
everything
he's
at it.
if he gets
Yeah,
caught, he's going to lose by 30 seconds. He's not worried about
yeah,
that so much as
yeah,
just this is the shock and awe technique. And then if he's running on fumes when he comes across the line, so be it. Feather power up ain't going to make no difference there. He's either going to win this thing with style or go down as a memorable moment in the ZRL, right? That's a good way to
exactly.
look
If
at it,
you've
isn't it?
got
Yeah,
to win it, I really like that, and I really respect that. And the gap's out to nearly 20 seconds, with a little bridge looking like
that's
Felton's
huge.
trying to bridge across. So that is a huge move. Now on the
Yeah.
left, we've got the women here, and Hayley Gill. This is interesting and incredibly impressive because she's put 16 seconds into Rogers and starts. On paper, she's I think what I said before was more sprint inclined, a bit more of a sprinter than a climber, definitely. I think this is kind of a case of, I said earlier on, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes the riders surprise themselves
I was going to
with
say
what they
sometimes
can
you're
do, and
just a good bike racer, right? You just don't already know your limits. So Haley
yeah.
now, when friends ask her what kind of rider are you, she could add, "I'm not a bad climber" into that conversation. I think, right, Kate?
Yeah, and I think she looks pretty comfortable actually. I mean, based on her
Sure
heart
does.
rate, she's at that perfect sweet spot where you can just get into a rhythm and go all day. And that gap is just continuing to open up to the two chasers behind her. So I think she's got this in the bag. It's only just over a kilometre left to go up the climb. I believe the graphic on the right is a great one. You can see the top of the climb and where all of those dots are climbing up it. But her power is really consistent. Her heart rate is really consistent. Naturally, her avatar looks very comfortable. Isn't that the beauty of the Zwift world,
Yeah, she's
Dave?
riding
That no
away
matter how
actually.
bad you look on your bike, your avatar looks delightful. But I actually think that she is well within her limits here, and this is one of the better rides we've seen across both seasons in the America West League. This is a really standout ride, and she will have a massive target on her back for the races
Ni-
coming up.
Nice time to do it, Kate, on the toughest course, certainly the hardest finish that we've seen in the history of the ZRL. This is the 13th time the community has raced, and that is a benchmark performance by Haley Gill there. So that one looks like there's not going to be a lot of drama around the finish there. There'll be a nice celebration at the finish line. The story over on the men's side of things, what have we got here as we jump back in, remembering that O'Reilly gaps come down to one rider, Felt here, Penvello. Well, that's O'Reilly that you got on your screen. He was the attack as we left the guys a couple minutes ago. Here comes Felt.
Well, this is
The
a
rest of the
this
guys
is
are
a
way
good
back. Yeah.
pairing. So
Yeah,
it's
actually, I mean,
nearly
Felton is going to join, but yeah, look at this, Kate. The other guys are pretty far back with a K and a half to go.
well, I mean, Felton did a good move there, and when he accelerated, we were actually watching O'Reilly, but you could see his numbers going to orange, and you knew that he wasn't just sitting on the front pulling pace, but he was actually launching an attack to do that. I think he'll join O'Reilly in a couple of 100 meters, and those pair, we might see a delightful sprint finish between a pair of climbers. They're my favourites. They always make me laugh. So we might see that at the finish, and they'll have to watch out. Hayley Gill, she is a very good sprinter, but she won't have to worry about a sprint finish here because she's very close to the finish. She'll be able to see that finish arch up ahead, and she's going to win this by close to 30 seconds ahead of Rogers and start. So amazing ride from her, and also an incredible ride from the Revo riders behind. But it's the Hayley Gill show in Innsbruck today.
I always remember having a laugh with the friend Dave Zabriskie about at a race saying to the crowd that he can time trial, he can climb, but this guy really couldn't sprint his way out of a wet paper bag, and Dave took offense
I
to
love that
that.
saying.
Yeah.
I know. I think that's a
Uh,
perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, it is, especially as someone who could do it yourself, Kate. So this is Haley Gill across line. Haley, congratulations. You certainly made your mark today on the toughest ZRL course that we've ever seen. You crushed it. Way to go. It's going to be Revo, Ryder, Rogers, and Stats coming in.
Yeah,
They'll
this
take
is
a lot
I
of
like.
points here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that overall we're not going to see much movement. I think that Revo might take out today. Although, look, interestingly, because it's Bromham and Gillick that are coming across for the next 2 points. So again, it isn't the time that counts here. It's actually the points are the more important aspect of what we have to look at there. So Haley Gill took the win there. When you mentioned that Catherine Curry was cheering her on. That says to me that she's got some very good brains
Let
behind
me
her
go
because
back because
Catherine Curry. Sorry,
with
back to the
Catherine,
men's.
yeah,
Uh,
well, Catherine was telling you hi. She wrote, uh, obviously, you two, I mean, rode, riding in the Peloton at the same time, there's always going to be a bond that you share. I think that's special and cool. Haley rode for the Amy D Foundation for a while. I hope she rides for them again. Catherine does some riding and, more importantly, directing with that team, the former U.S. champion. This is going to be the men's race. Nathan is finding, I think, Felton right here. Penvelo, very familiar kit. Love the energy coming from this team. And thank you, Ian, for your
what?
comments as well. Ian Mulligan deserves a shout out. We appreciate that, Ian. They're getting some big shout outs. William Fisher loving Penvelo right now, and he should, as they've had a great ride today.
Well, we're loving
14 seconds.
Penvelo. We saw
Yeah.
a very brave ride actually through the intermediate sprints from those lads. But Quinn Felton, this is the ride of the day. Cameron O'Reilly, no doubt, set this up for him. But Quinn
Yeah.
Felton didn't. We knew he was going to make the catch. I thought they might have a sprint finish together. We even, got a bit of fun in our heads that it might be nice to commentate the two climbers sprinting together, but not to be because Quinn Felton has his own ideas and he is powering away. This gap continues to open up. He'll take a really easy victory in the end. So big ups to the Penvelo rider.
Nothing quite like coming across the finish line alone, not being challenged. That's one of the greatest feelings in sport. And I've said it before, Kate, in order to win, you have to risk losing. That is a benchmark quality of champions. Now, you don't always win. That's the thing. You lose more often than you do, but O'Reilly will be back. I remember him from previous races, and it's a name that we're starting to really pick up on. All the points matter. We're going to see. So this is one of the top picks as we look now at Lawrence here. Dirty Rascals Riot coming across the line. We'll jump around quite a bit right now as a bunch of riders finishing. There's an avatar to remember.
I was just about to comment on that actually. That was quite Matt Lawrence. It seems like he's got a good sense of humour. Caleb Carl, he's crossing the line now. He's kind of a bit of a discovery like Haley Gill this week. They've both really stepped up and made a big impact on the racing.
Yeah, they sure have. It has been, well, one thing I think that we learned is this quality of course is exactly what we're looking for. Now, it's like a expensive bottle of champagne or whiskey or whatever. You don't want to have it every night, but every now and then, getting on this course is going to be a lot of fun. This league, it's a great mix of team time trials and these hybrid scratch points race that we have here. A lot of points. That tallying will be done. A little more complicated with all the men that started here. As it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out today. After, yeah, I think this is going to go down as one of the, for not everybody. I get not everyone loves the after party KOM element here, but this was great racing today. Certainly for our viewers out there, thanks everyone for watching because it's been one of the best days we've had on the ZRL, I'd have to say.
Yeah, I must admit, when I first saw the course for this week, I thought, oh, I'm not sure about that kind of climb and what it might do to the racing beforehand. I thought that it might, could have the potential to turn it into a bit of negative racing as people were a little bit fearful of what was to come on the course. But Interestingly, every race that I've watched in APAC and now in America's West, and certainly the reports I heard from the other races, it's been quite the opposite. There hasn't been any field that has just rolled along, but it's been quite aggressive. And we've had some big change ups toward the finish. I mean, Felton flying past Cam O'Reilly to take the win. That was a big ride. Caleb Carl, we called him early on as one to watch, but when O'Reilly attacked, he was actually quite a ways back in that bunch. So he's also climbed his way back into fourth position for the day. So that's an impressive ride. We've got Mashed Potato here, who definitely takes the award for the best name. Uh, Even if he didn't love the climb today, he's came in around 22nd spot. But Mashed Potato for the win in terms of naming conventions.
That's one thing. It's always noteworthy. You're always going to uncover these Easter eggs each day that we have the ZRL. That's for sure.
Oh, look, if
This
somebody
season's been
wants to
great.
call themselves Easter egg, oh, that would really please me. I mean, we are coming up. That's our next holiday to look forward to is Easter. So we'd love some Easter eggs to commentate on, wouldn't we?
That's probably going to be the start of season 3. I'm guessing as I look at the timing of that, right? So, Kelly, ATP. Well, we certainly had a great day of racing, Kate. It's always a pleasure. I apologize for the rough start today. It's funny how you go for 6 hours and then, you know what it was? I'll be honest, is when you think like, what happens when you click on this? I did exactly that, which Nathan has trained me not to do, right? But sure enough, when you click on that, all of a sudden the screen goes wonky and you can't get the mic to work and you have to reset. And that's why you need a good, solid teammate like you to take a pull while I reset everything. And a huge thanks to Nathan Guerra as well. It's always fun,
Yeah,
Kate,
we
isn't
are
it?
lucky that we've got an A-plus production crew in the background. In the APAC last night, Dave, you'll be pleased to know that I had a kid flat halfway through as my 3-year-old came in to join the action. So I think, we all understand that stuff happens. Can we just go back to the racing for 1 second and talk about these gems we discovered today? Because Hayley Gill, where did she come from? And the same in the men. Quinn Felton, he looks great on paper, but goodness me, he's not a name that we've been calling a lot in the series so far. So let's just take a look at some replays here because Quinn Felton, look at that heart rate, 195 beats per minute, and he flew past Cameron O'Reilly. As soon as he caught, he was out of the seat, pushing towards that orange zone almost and straight past him. So that was a pretty big power move by Felton.
That was a double dip because he would have, I would think, known that O'Reilly had already dropped his power up, his feather. So that was the kind of up and over the top there. Champion standard. There's a song, Quinn the Mighty Eskimo. Well, that's our mighty Quinn out here. Great job by Quinn Felton taking the win.
You know
You
the
know that
most
song, Kate?
random fact, Dave. I do not, but I will Google it now.
Yeah.
And I love that you have a piece for everything. Hayley Gill here, she was a bit of a step up in the women. Again, a name that we haven't commentated on a lot so far this season, and I love seeing that. And I also think that the Revo ladies, Anna Rogers and Alicia Stats, they've kind of become quite accustomed to having things their way by being quite physically dominant in the series so far. So Hayley Gill really stuck it to them today. And I think this only sets up the end of the series to be that little bit more exciting.
So it's important to remember, too, that this is a team sport. That's what's partly defines the Zwift Racing League. So even though Hayley Gill gets that really sweet win, and it's noteworthy for sure, but second and third, more important than a first. And then you start looking at how the other riders on the team did to figure out who our top teams were out here today. It's going to be a season-long battle, no doubt about it, between those squads. Another rider that stood out today, Broom, here of the Velocity Vixen squad. She had quite a ride. Showed some heart, too, in the early going. It's a really good indicator. If I was a director, I think that's it. I love that aspect of it is that you learn about the psychology of riders, overcoming obstacles. Christina Grossman comes to mind. Did you hear about that one, Kate? Her bike flopped off of her trainer in the middle of a sprint. She was going so hard. And
Yeah, I mean, we
uh,
talk about technical flats, but that's kind of the worst kind. You think that in the Zwift world you're safe from falls, but not necessarily, as it turns out.
yeah, exactly. Here's another star that we have now identified, Alicia Stats, as you're mentioning, as we go back and watch some of the action. This was from back on the Innsbruck ring, where the early animation of this race happened. So
Well,
yeah,
we'll
going back and looking
get
at
those
some of the sprint.
points when we can. Sosnowski, he didn't he really belt it out in this first intermediate sprint. I feel like maybe he paid the price a bit for it later on in the